It was a warm summer afternoon, the kind of day when the air feels heavy but alive. I was in the kitchen, covered in flour, kneading dough for sweet rolls. I wanted to surprise my family, just a little reminder that even after 22 years of marriage, I still found joy in simple things like baking for the people I loved. My hands were sticky, my hair falling loose around my face, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my palms quickly on my apron and reached for it, expecting maybe a message from my daughter Jessica or a quick reminder from Robert about groceries. Instead, when I opened the text, my heart nearly stopped. Just 4 words stared back at me. I've met someone else. Goodbye. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked hard once, twice, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less cruel. But they didn't. The phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my hand. My knees nearly gave out, and I had to grip the counter to steady myself. This couldn't be real. Not Robert. Not my husband. Not after everything we had shared. The minutes that followed stretched like hours. I stood frozen, staring at that glowing screen, hoping it was some tasteless joke or a mistake. My mind kept repeating the same words. Not me. Not my family. This doesn't happen to us. I wanted to reply, to demand an explanation, but my fingers wouldn't move. I told myself that when he came home, it would all make sense, that this was just some horrible misunderstanding. But when I heard the door open that evening and Robert stepped inside, dragging a large suitcase behind him, I knew it wasn't a mistake. My heart turned to stone. He set the bag down with a dull thud and said casually, almost cheerfully, "Pick this up on the way home. Thought it'd be big enough for what I need." My throat was dry and my voice barely a whisper. "What you need? Robert, please tell me this isn't serious. Please say this is some cruel joke." He looked at me then, his eyes calm, almost attached, as if he were discussing the weather. "Karen, let's sit down for a moment." He took my hand, not gently, not lovingly, but like someone delivering bad news with forced patience, and guided me to the couch. My chest tightened as I waited for the words that would follow. "We've had a good run," he said quietly, "but everything we've built, it was for the family, not for me. I've given you stability. I've made sure Jessica never needed anything. But my happiness? That never mattered to anyone. And now she's grown, and I want something for myself. I've fallen in love, Karen, like a teenager. I can't ignore it anymore." I stared at him, numb, trying to process the betrayal laced in every word. "Robert, no, we can fix this. Tell me what I've done wrong. Tell me what I need to change. I'll do it. Just don't walk away from 22 years. But he shook his head, cold and resolute. "This marriage, it's a completed project. Our life together served its purpose. Now it's time for us to go our separate ways." The room spun around me. My chest ached as if it had cracked open. I reached for him, desperate, my voice breaking. "Robert, please don't do this. Don't throw everything away." He stood, picked up his suitcase, and without another glance walked down the hall. I could hear the zippers, the clatter of drawers opening and closing as he packed. Each sound felt like a nail sealing the coffin of our life together. By the time the front door slammed shut behind him, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a tomb, filled with echoes of love that, according to him, had never been enough. After Robert's words sank in, my mind drifted backward, as if I needed to remind both him and myself of the road we had walked together. 22 years is not a season you just discard. I remembered those early days when Jessica was little and we lived in a cramped apartment barely big enough for the three of us. We scraped by on his entry-level paycheck, and I stretched every dollar until it screamed. I cooked beans and rice, sewed Jessica's clothes by hand, and smiled even when the cupboards looked empty. We celebrated the smallest victories, his first raise, the day we bought our second-hand couch, the first Christmas tree we could actually decorate instead of borrowing ornaments from neighbors. Then came the day we signed the mortgage for our first real house. I cried when we walked through that doorway, not because it was fancy, but because it was ours. For 10 years, we paid that loan, penny by penny, never once missing a payment. I thought of the nights he came home late, smelling like grease and sweat, and how I'd sit him down to a hot meal, proud that my cooking could at least ease his exhaustion. I believed we were a team, fighting side by side for our future. But sitting there on that couch, listening to him dismiss it all, I realized how differently he saw things. He didn't see the love baked into every casserole, the patience in every load of laundry, or the comfort of a clean home. Instead, he looked at me with contempt. "You've always been in that kitchen, Karen," he sneered. "Always in an apron, always cooking. But you never once asked what I wanted. You think your pies and rolls make me happy? They suffocate me. I can't live like that anymore." The words cut deeper than any knife. All those nights I stayed awake, sewing Jessica's school projects. All the times I went without new clothes so he could look sharp at work. All the moments I put myself last. None of it mattered. He had reduced my life, my devotion, to nothing more than flour on my hands and meals on the table. I wanted to scream, to remind him of the sacrifices we both made, the years of building brick by brick. Instead, I sat paralyzed, staring at him as if he were a stranger in my living room. Then came the sound that will haunt me forever, the slow, deliberate zipping of his suitcase, the sharp clicks of drawers opening and closing, the shuffle of his shoes across the floor. Each noise echoed like a countdown to the end of my marriage. Finally, the slam of the front door shook the walls. Silence filled the house, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on me until I thought I might collapse. 22 years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice had ended not with tears or arguments, but with a suitcase rolling out the door and a door slamming shut. And in that silence, I realized my husband hadn't just left me. He had erased me. The night after Robert left, the silence inside the house pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I couldn't bear it anymore. So I picked up the phone and called Nancy Parker, my closest friend, my neighbor, the woman I had leaned on more times than I could count. She didn't sound surprised when I asked her to come over. Within half an hour, she was at my door, carrying a bottle of wine like it was the solution to everything. She poured generously into 2 mismatched mugs from my kitchen cabinet. "Forget the glasses," she laughed. "Who cares, right?" We sat at the table, and I watched the deep red swirl in front of me, but I didn't drink. My throat was too tight. "I don't understand, Nancy," I whispered, my voice cracking. "How can he just throw everything away? After 22 years. She sighed, almost as if she'd rehearsed this. "Karen, men do stupid things. He'll come crawling back. Don't torture yourself." I looked up at her, searching for comfort, but her eyes darted away. Something was off. I leaned in, my voice sharper now. "You know something, don't you?" Her fingers tightened around the mug. She took a long sip before answering, her words slurring slightly as the wine began to loosen her tongue. "All right, yes. I knew. Robert, he asked me for a favor." My stomach dropped. "What favor?" Nancy exhaled heavily, her shoulders sagging. He needed a place to meet her. That girl. I gave him the keys to my mother's empty apartment. It wasn't being used. I thought. She stopped, pressing her lips together as if she realized too late what she'd confessed. The room spun. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood, my hands trembling. "You gave him a place? You let him betray me under your roof? Nancy, how could you?" She reached across the table, her voice pleading. "Karen, please. I didn't think it was serious. I thought it was just a fling, something that would pass. I didn't want to hurt you." Her words twisted inside me like a knife. Not only had Robert betrayed me, but the woman I had trusted most had enabled him. And then, as if the wound weren't already deep enough, Nancy laughed bitterly and muttered, "Besides, it's not like it was the first time. You were so blind, Karen. He always had his little adventures, even with me once years ago." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The confession hit me harder than Robert's text. My so-called best friend, the one who held my hand through childbirth, who knew every secret I'd ever shared. She had crossed that line with my husband. I stood frozen, my voice low and shaking. Get out. Karen, don't get out. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. My chest burned with rage and heartbreak. Nancy stumbled to her feet, fumbling with her purse, her face pale despite the wine. At the doorway, she paused, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'm sorry, but I didn't care. I shoved the door shut behind her and locked it. Then I collapsed against the wood, sliding to the floor as sobs ripped out of me. That night, I learned the cruelest truth. Betrayal doesn't just come from the person you love. It can also come from the friend you thought would stand by you forever. The night stretched on endlessly after Nancy left. My chest felt hollow, my house no longer a home. I told myself that at least Jessica would understand, that my daughter would see my pain and stand beside me. That thought alone kept me from falling apart completely. When she finally came home, tossing her backpack on the couch and slipping off her shoes, I tried to steady my voice. Jess, honey, we need to talk. She looked up, her expression wary. Is this about Dad? I nodded, my throat tightening. Yes. He's leaving us. He says he's met someone else. Jessica's face twisted, not with shock or sorrow, but with anger at me. So you just let this happen? You couldn't keep him? You couldn't even try? Her words hit like a slap. I blinked at her, stunned. Jess, no, it wasn't like that. I begged him to stay. I told him we could work through anything. But he didn't want to. She slammed her hands on the table, her voice rising. And now what? What about my tuition? My future? Who's going to pay for that if he walks out? You don't work. You've never worked. You just cook and clean. How are we supposed to live on that? I felt my body go cold. Jessica, I did everything I could to give you a safe, happy home. I put you first every single day of your life. She laughed bitterly, her eyes sharp. Great. A home full of casseroles and cookies. That's really going to pay the bills, isn't it? Maybe if you had been less busy baking and more focused on keeping Dad happy, he wouldn't have left. The words cut deeper than anything Robert had said. I had expected him to dismiss me, but not her. Not my own child. Jessica, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Please don't talk to me like that. You don't understand, but she only raised her voice louder, nearly shouting now. No, Mom, you don't understand. Everything we had was because of him, and now you've ruined it. You ruined everything. Something inside me snapped. My hand moved before I even thought, and for the first time in her life, I struck my daughter across the face. The sound cracked through the room, louder than the slam of any door. She froze, her eyes wide with shock, her cheek flaming red where my hand had landed. We stared at each other in silence, both horrified, both broken. My chest heaved, and I forced the words out through trembling lips. Don't you dare blame me for his betrayal. If you want someone to accuse, talk to your father. He's the one who walked away, not me. Jessica touched her cheek, her anger replaced by stunned silence. She had never seen me like this. I stumbled back into the kitchen, poured a shot of whiskey I never thought I'd touch, and swallowed it in one burning gulp. The bitterness coated my tongue, but it was nothing compared to the bitterness spreading through my heart. For the first time since Robert's text, I realized I wasn't just a wife abandoned. I was a mother who had lost her child's trust, and that, more than anything, left me drowning in despair. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't stay in that house another day. Every corner reeked of betrayal, Robert's absence echoing in the silence, Jessica's angry words still clinging to the walls. I stuffed clothes into a small suitcase with trembling hands, not even caring what I packed. A few dresses, a pair of jeans, some sweaters, just enough to get away. I scribbled a note for Jessica, though I doubted she'd read it. At the bus station, I sat clutching my ticket, surrounded by strangers whose lives seemed whole and untouched. The ride out of the city felt endless, but when the landscape shifted, skyscrapers fading into rolling hills, highways giving way to winding country roads, I could almost breathe again. By the time the bus pulled into the small town where my sister Maggie lived, the heavy knot in my chest had loosened, just a little. Maggie's house sat at the edge of town, a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch and wind chimes that sang in the breeze. She came running down the steps when she saw me, her arms wide. I collapsed into her hug, letting the tears spill freely. "Karen," she whispered, "you should have come sooner." That evening, we sat at her kitchen table, the smell of fresh cornbread filling the air. Maggie poured us both coffee, her gaze steady, unwavering. "You've lived as his servant, not his wife," she said bluntly, never one to soften the truth. "Now you have to learn to live for yourself." Her words stung because they were true. For years, I had revolved my life around Robert's moods, his preferences, his plans. I'd forgotten who I was outside of being his wife and Jessica's mother. Sitting there across from Maggie, I realized just how empty I had become. "But I don't even know how to start," I admitted, my voice small. "I've never worked. I've never had to stand on my own. What if I can't?" Maggie reached across the table and gripped my hand firmly. "You can, and you will. Look at me. I built my business from scratch. I raised 4 boys who know how to stand on their own 2 feet. You think you can't learn? Karen, you've survived worse. You're stronger than you believe." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up in tears. The crickets outside my window, the soft rustle of trees, the distant bark of a dog, it all wrapped around me like a lullaby. In the morning, I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, the sun warm on my face. The field stretched wide and green, dotted with barns and grazing cattle. For a moment, I simply stood there, breathing in the southern air, letting it fill me with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I wasn't healed yet. The wounds were still raw, my heart still broken. But here, in this quiet town, with Maggie by my side, I felt the faintest stirrings of strength. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to live for myself. One morning, Maggie insisted I go for a walk instead of sitting inside with my thoughts. "Fresh air clears the mind," she said, pressing a sun hat into my hands. Reluctantly, I stepped out, following the narrow dirt road that curved past fields heavy with summer crops. The air smelled of wildflowers and freshly cut hay, so different from the exhaust and asphalt I had grown used to in the city. I must have been lost in thought, because I didn't hear the rumble of the tractor until it was right behind me. A voice called out, warm and teasing, "Ma'am, unless you want to end up flattened, you might want to step aside." I spun around, startled, and saw a man leaning out of the cab of a red tractor, grinning at me. He was sunburned, broad-shouldered, his shirt streaked with dust, but his eyes, blue and bright, carried a kind of humor that disarmed me. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, stepping to the side of the road. He chuckled. "No harm done. Need a lift? This old thing isn't much, but it'll get you down the road faster than walking." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you'll have to help me up. I've never climbed into a tractor before." He hopped down and offered his hand, strong and steady. "Name's Tom Reynolds," he said as he pulled me up beside him. "Karen," I replied, settling into the seat. "I'm staying with my sister Maggie for a while." As the tractor bumped along, he glanced at me. "Didn't think I'd seen you around before. Guess I'd remember." Something about the way he said it made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in weeks. Conversation flowed easily after that. He asked simple questions, where I grew up, what I liked to do, and he actually listened, nodding, laughing at the right moments, never once interrupting. It struck me how rare that felt. With Robert, everything had been about him, his work, his stress, his needs. I had spent years shrinking myself down to fit around his life. But with Tom, in the cab of that dusty tractor, I felt like my words mattered again. We ended up back at Maggie's gate. Before I climbed down, I surprised myself by saying, "Would you like to come in for some iced tea?" He smiled, brushing the brim of his cap back. "I'd like that." That afternoon, we sat on the porch, sipping tea and talking until the sun began to set. He told me about his 10-year-old son, about the land he worked, about the quiet pride he found in honest labor. I listened, not out of duty, but because I wanted to. His laughter was easy, his presence steady, and for the first time, the weight in my chest eased. Still, when I went to bed that night, doubt crept in. My heart was tender, raw from wounds not yet healed. Could I really trust another man after everything Robert had done? I didn't know. But as I drifted to sleep, I realized something new had entered my life. Not certainty, not even hope, but the faint, trembling spark of possibility. The day had been gray from the moment I opened my eyes, the sky swollen with clouds that threatened rain. By afternoon, the storm broke. Sheets of water pounded Maggie's roof, the gutters overflowing as thunder rumbled across the hills. I tried to distract myself with chores, folding laundry, wiping counters, but something gnawed at me, a restless unease I couldn't name. It wasn't long before I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked out the window and froze. Robert's black SUV stood in the driveway, windshield wipers slashing back and forth. My stomach dropped when I saw Jessica in the passenger seat, twisting her hair around her finger, her face tight with anger. I pulled a shawl around my shoulders and stepped outside, rain soaking the hem of my dress in seconds. Robert rolled down the window, his voice sharp over the storm. "How long are you planning to hide out here, Karen? You've abandoned your family. Get in the car." I forced myself to speak calmly. "Robert, you made your choice. You have a new life now. Leave me be." His jaw tightened, eyes flashing with contempt. "Don't play the martyr. You're 40 years old, stuck in an apron with nothing to offer. Do you think you can start over now? You're too old, too useless." The word stung, but before I could answer, Jessica shoved open her door and stormed toward me, rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. "Mom, what are you doing? You're humiliating us. You're supposed to keep the family together, not run off to the country like some selfish teenager. Do you even care how this looks? Or how I'm supposed to pay for college now?" I stared at her, shocked, the storm raging around us. "Jess, sweetheart, No," she cut me off, her voice rising above the thunder. "You ruined everything. Dad worked his whole life to give us what we had, and you drove him away with your whining and your baking and your boring little life. You're pathetic." Her words struck deeper than the rain. I reached for her, but she recoiled, glaring at me as though I were a stranger. That was when Robert stepped out of the car, rainwater streaming off his coat. His voice dropped low, dangerous. "Enough of this nonsense. You're coming home. Now." He lunged forward and grabbed my arm. I yanked back, but his grip tightened like iron. "Let go." I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the storm. When I resisted, he lost patience. In a sudden, brutal motion, he dragged me across the yard, my feet slipping in the mud. I fell hard, the impact jarring through my body, but he didn't stop. His hand twisted into my hair, yanking me up, and he began pulling me toward the car. Rain blurred my vision as pain shot through my scalp. "Robert, stop!" I cried, kicking against the wet ground. "You're hurting me." "Quit fighting," he snarled. "You're my wife. You'll do as I say." From the porch, I heard Maggie's desperate voice. "Let her go. Robert, stop it right now." She rushed down the steps, but the rain made the ground slick. By the time she reached us, Robert had shoved me against the car door. Jessica stood frozen, her face pale, horror flickering across her features, but she said nothing. The metal of the car was cold against my back as Robert fumbled with the handle, trying to force me inside. Panic surged through me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The storm thundered overhead, but inside my chest was a silence more terrifying, the silence of despair, the terrifying certainty that I might never break free. In that moment, drenched, bruised, and powerless in Robert's grip, I felt my spirit collapse. Hope drained out of me like rainwater running into the gutter. I was no longer just a wife abandoned or a mother rejected. I was a woman on the verge of being erased completely. Just when I thought the storm would swallow me whole, a blinding beam of headlights cut through the rain. Tires screeched against the wet gravel, and another truck skidded into the driveway. For a heartbeat, Robert froze, his hand still twisted in my hair, his body pressed against mine as he tried to shove me into the car. The truck door flew open, and out stepped Tom Reynolds. His figure loomed in the downpour, tall and unshaken, a fury in his eyes I had never seen before. "Let her go, Robert." His voice thundered louder than the storm itself. Robert sneered, refusing to release me. "Stay out of this, farmer. This is between me and my wife." But Tom was already moving, his boots splashing mud as he closed the distance. He yanked Robert back so hard that I stumbled free, falling against the side of the car, gasping for air. Pain radiated from my scalp where Robert's grip had been, but I barely felt it. All I saw was Tom, fists clenched, standing between me and the man who had once been my husband. Robert lunged at him, swinging wildly, but Tom caught the blow and retaliated with one of his own. The crack of fist against jaw echoed through the storm. Robert staggered, blood mingling with rain down his face. "You lay another hand on her," Tom growled, his voice shaking with rage, "and I swear to God, I'll bury you right here in this mud." For the first time, I saw fear flash in Robert's eyes. He tried to mask it with bravado, spitting blood into the dirt. "You think you can steal my wife? You're nothing. She's mine." Tom stepped forward, his voice steady, deadly. "She's not yours. Not anymore. You lost the right to call her that the second you raised a hand to her." Behind them, Jessica stood frozen in the rain, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. For so long she had believed her father's words, believed his version of events. But now, watching him drag me through the mud like an object, seeing Tom fight to protect me, something inside her cracked. "Dad!" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Stop. Please. You're hurting her." Robert glanced at her, distracted, and Tom seized the moment. With a final shove, he sent Robert stumbling backward into the mud. Robert cursed, scrambling to his feet, but when Tom stepped closer, towering over him, Robert faltered. "This is your last warning," Tom said, his chest heaving. "If you ever come near her again, if you so much as drive down this road, I will finish what we started tonight." For a long, breathless moment, all that could be heard was the rain. Finally, Robert spat out another curse, stormed back to his car, and slammed the door shut. The engine roared, tires spun in the mud, and then he was gone, tail lights fading into the storm. My knees gave out, and I collapsed into the mud, sobbing. Tom was at my side instantly, lifting me gently, his arms steady and warm despite the chill. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. Jessica approached slowly, her face pale, her eyes shimmering with tears. She reached for me hesitantly, her voice shaking. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't understand. I'm so sorry." I looked at her, my daughter, torn between anger and love. And though my body ached and my spirit trembled, I felt something shift. For the first time, Jessica had seen the truth. The storm passed, but the memory of Robert's violence lingered in my bones. For days, I barely left Maggie's house, afraid he might return. Tom checked in often, sometimes bringing fresh bread from the bakery or stopping by just to sit with me on the porch. His presence was steady, grounding, and yet I couldn't shake the thought that he was simply a kind farmer who had risked too much for a woman like me. One evening, as the cicadas hummed in the warm Kentucky twilight, Tom asked me to come with him to his place. I hesitated, nervous, but he smiled gently. I want to show you something, Karen. Trust me. We drove down winding roads until the trees parted to reveal a sprawling property. At first glance, I saw barns, stacks of lumber, and the sharp outline of machinery silhouetted against the fading sky. But when Tom pulled up near the office building, I realized this wasn't just farmland. It was a full-scale lumber business. "This is mine," he said simply, watching my stunned expression. I started small, just a sawmill with a few hands. Over the years, I built it up. Now it employs half the town. He paused, his gaze steady on me. "I never told you because I didn't want you to think it changed who I am. I'm still just a man who drives a tractor, who gets sawdust in his hair. But I wanted you to know you're not choosing someone with nothing to offer." My throat tightened as the truth settled in. For so long, Robert had made me feel like I was worthless, too old to start over, too dependent to survive without him. Yet, here stood Tom, strong, honest, successful, and he saw me as more than enough. Then, right there in the fading light, Tom knelt down in the dirt, his rough hands trembling. "Karen, I know your heart is still healing. I won't rush you, but I love you. I want to give you the life you deserve. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred my vision. For the first time in years, my heart swelled not with fear or despair, but with something pure, hope. I whispered, "Yes." Weeks later, we stood in the courthouse for my divorce hearing. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair loose around my shoulders. When Robert walked in, he did a double take. His eyes widened as if he didn't recognize me, this confident, radiant woman who no longer cowered before him. During the proceedings, he tried to sneer, tried to argue, but his voice lacked the conviction it once carried. When the judge asked about the division of property, I lifted my chin. I don't want anything from him. Not the house, not the accounts, not a single penny. I only want my freedom. Robert's face twisted, a mixture of shock and bitterness. For the first time, he realized he had truly lost me, not just the woman he abandoned, but the woman I had become. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing material, but I felt richer than I ever had, because I finally understood. Starting over didn't mean starting from nothing. It meant starting with myself. The church bells rang softly that morning, echoing across the small Kentucky town. The white clapboard church sat on a hill, its stained glass windows glowing with sunlight. Inside, the pews were filled with neighbors, friends from Maggie's community, and even some of Tom's workers from the mill. There were wildflowers in mason jars lining the aisle, their simple beauty more meaningful than any expensive bouquet could ever be. I stood at the entrance, my heart pounding, dressed in a cream-colored gown Maggie had helped me choose. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt right. Soft lace sleeves, a flowing skirt that brushed the floor. As I looked at myself in the mirror earlier that morning, I hardly recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't the broken, desperate wife who had begged Robert to stay. She was someone new, someone strong. When the music began, I stepped forward, my hands trembling. But the moment I saw Tom waiting at the altar, steady and calm, all my fear melted away. His eyes met mine, filled with the same kindness that had pulled me out of despair. For the first time in years, I felt entirely at peace. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt. The pastor spoke of second chances, of the courage to start again. As Tom slipped the ring onto my finger, his hand shook and he whispered, "You'll never have to doubt your worth again." Tears slid down my cheeks as I vowed the same. When we turned to face the congregation, I noticed movement near the back of the church. My breath caught. Jessica stood there, clutching the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. For a moment, I thought she would run, but then she walked slowly down the aisle, tears streaming freely. "Mom!" Her voice cracked as she reached me, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry. I was blind. I didn't see what he was doing to you, what you gave up for me. I should have believed you. I should have stood by you. Please, can you forgive me?" The world around us faded. I saw not the girl who had hurled cruel words at me in anger, but the daughter I had rocked to sleep, the child whose first steps I had celebrated, the young woman I had prayed for every night. My heart ached, but it also swelled with love. I reached out and pulled her into my arms. "Jessica, there is nothing in this world I wouldn't forgive you for. You're my daughter, always." She sobbed against my shoulder, and the crowd quietly wiped away their own tears. Tom placed a hand gently on my back, steadying me, welcoming her too. For the first time in so long, I felt like a mother again. That evening, as lanterns lit up the churchyard and laughter filled the warm summer air, I stood with Tom by my side and Jessica nearby, her smile small but genuine. I looked up at the star-streaked sky and let the truth settle in my heart. At 40, I wasn't ending a life. I was beginning one, not defined by sacrifice or servitude or betrayal, but by love, respect, and freedom. And as the music swirled around us, I finally understood. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply choosing happiness when the world expects you to crumble.